Welcome to the Pretty Powerful Podcast, where powerful women are interviewed every week to share real inspiring stories and incredible insight to help women or anyone break the barriers, be a part of innovation, shatter the glass ceiling, and dominate to the top of their sport, industry, or life's mission. Join us as we celebrate exceptional women and step into our power. And now, here's your host, Angela Gennari.
Hello and welcome to the Pretty Powerful Podcast. My name is Angela Gennari, and today I am sitting here with Amanda Bear. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So I'm super excited to introduce Amanda to you guys because she is just a badass, and y'all know I love badass women. So Amanda Bear is a senior security specialist in insider threat investigations. Amanda has recently joined the private sector after spending over 9 years in law enforcement, where she worked from a local level up to a federal level, joint task force with the ATF. She has worked on cases ranging from anti-corruption and gangs to domestic violence and homicides. Amanda holds several specialized qualifications, including defense tactics and firearms instructor, which makes her one of the few females in the U.S. holding both certifications. She was the first female to go out for the North Metro SWAT Team. She was recently been inducted as the treasurer for ACES Atlanta, and Amanda continues to be a reserve police officer so she can continue to help improve her community and those around her. And I know she's also a huge fan of fitness and just defense and everything just badass. So thank you so much. So, and I got to tell you guys, I actually met Amanda because a gentleman that is a mutual friend of ours said, you have got to meet this woman. She is so awesome and she needs to be on your podcast. And I could not agree more. So I love it when men are the ones who make the introductions because that's how much you stand out to them.
Yeah.
So
it was, that was an interesting how it came about.
Right.
Yeah. And he's been nothing but, very supportive and kind of got me into the door with security and the corporate setting. And
very cool.
Been nothing but amazing things since.
Yeah. Well, and, we're fortunate to be part of a group of security specialists who really, truly are top notch. Mm-hmm. So, everyone that's kind of in our circle of, people that we know, colleagues, they're really, truly looking out for the best for our communities and each other. Yeah. So thankfully, I'm very, very happy about that. So let's talk a little bit about why you decided to go into law enforcement.
Oh, man. It's kind of a crazy, well, I don't know about crazy, but kind of a interesting route that I took.
Yeah.
So my background is in biotechnology.
Okay.
That's what I started. I obviously, my family was, you're going to be a doctor.
Right.
You have to go the pre-med route. Mm. And I did like science a lot. I still do. I love it. But I think that I like law enforcement and science are very similar in the fact that there is facts. Things are factual based, right? And there's evidence, and then you can prove your theory or, whatever it is that you're investigating, right?
Right.
So there is still that correlation there. I really fell in love with forensics.
Yeah.
While I was studying, and so got into biotechnology. Lived through 9/11. So that always resounded within myself and wanting to help people. So my mom is a teacher and my dad, they met actually when he was in EMS.
Oh, cool.
So that is my background. Like, we want to help people. I come kind of from that. So, I loved what I was doing, but I felt like I still needed to do more. Mm-hmm. So eventually I got out. I decided I had a few friends that were within the police force.
Yeah.
Their stories were great. So I just really was like, okay, well, I really, truly enjoy trying to figure out, why did things occur?
Yeah.
And then on top of it, I really like the physical aspect of it.
Uh-huh.
I do like to run and gun, as I say.
Uh-huh.
And it was a little bit of a challenge. So I decided, okay, well, now's the time. I went for it, and that's how I got into it.
Awesome. Okay, very cool. So then you got into law enforcement, and then that led you down into investigations. So that, I guess, was that curiosity that you always had on solving things, right?
Yeah.
And so when you get into the investigation side, what are the challenges that you're facing as a woman in this role of, kind of male-dominated law enforcement.
Yeah, there's a lot of challenges being a female and within the industry itself, but more than anything, I think with investigations, especially what type of investigations you're doing, sometimes they think that you cannot relate.
Right.
So in order to get them to talk or to open up to you may not be the easiest, especially, what demographic are you also? I mean,
right,
so, I always try to go out if I knew that maybe something that would come up where they couldn't potentially relate to me or, and whatnot. So I would get somebody else, like one of my coworkers, to go with me for, maybe they could relate to them, So you just have to take a lot of different things into account. And
right.
Yeah. So there's hurdles, but you try to be relatable. You try to be, put yourself in their shoes, and maybe you can't, and that's okay.
Right. Do you feel like women and men do the investigations differently? Or do you think there's a set protocol that you follow all the time?
I think that we all want the same end goal.
Right.
I think how we go about it can be different, though. And we do think a little bit differently. But also, from my own personal experiences, I can draw upon those.
Yeah.
And I think that I may have more at times just because of being a female in law enforcement. Sometimes you see and hear things differently and experience things differently than a male would. So sometimes you can relate, especially within maybe like domestic violence,
right.
You can relate to the women a little bit better, know? And so you just have to kind of play it by ear and see what case is going to take, a certain expertise.
Yeah. So we had talked briefly prior to the podcast about, interviewing victims and how hard that was. Because I was saying that, I don't know how I would do sitting in a room with somebody that I know did some pretty awful things, especially to women or children. And so, I don't know that I'd be the best fit for law enforcement. But
you may be a great one.
But, it's, I understand, it's really about the victim. It's about getting them justice, and it's about, doing right on their behalf. And you were talking about one of the most challenging parts of it is making them live through it again as the investigation is happening. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So unfortunately with our system, our court systems right now, especially because of the pandemic, all the cases are backlogged.
Yeah.
And that plays a little bit into the account of, how fast the system, the DA is moving along with some of the cases and stuff like that.
Right.
And there's a lot of things that go into that. But ultimately, unfortunately, it ends up hurting the victims themselves because it takes years to prosecute these cases.
Yeah.
And because of that, you have to dredge up all of these old feelings, all of the, you have to re-interview everybody. And it just becomes such a process that you can see the inner turmoil. You can see that they are having to go back through the past where they may have already gotten, help and counseling and gotten on, with their lives. And they're having to interview, and then on top of it, it may get stalled another couple months. Yeah. And then another attorney and another investigator may come on the case, and so then they have to re-interview them again.
Wow.
And so it just becomes this long, tedious process that, unfortunately, it's horrible for the victim itself. And that, to me, is the worst part of the entire process.
Right. Wow. So this is related and unrelated at the same time, but I'm going to say it anyway. So I'm reading this book right now, Audible, because I'm 8, can't pay attention enough to read a book. But I'm listening to this Audible Silva Mind Control. Have you ever heard of this?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm big into meditation, and I'm reading this mind control book, and it's not about like ESP and predicting the future like people think. What it is, it's about putting yourself in a situation in your mind that seems so real, right? Okay. So it's envisioning, like, if I got this contract, how would it feel? What would you think? Where would you be? What are the senses around you, right? And so it's really about putting your mind into it so you are living the moment before you've lived the moment, right? So it's crazy, I know. But what I'm thinking
very
about,
intrigued.
I know. Oh, trust me. I'm listening to it at the gym, and people are probably like, what is she doing? Because I'll stop and I'll take some notes. So dorky.
Well, you've already gotten me into the meditating
right,
app.
I know.
So I might have to get into this too.
I'm teaching you all about meditation and mind control.
I feel like this is like the doctor.
But I'm thinking about this, and it's like when you're interviewing these victims, it's like they've lived through this. And one thing about mind control is you can change the way you think of a situation. And that's what's so crazy about victims reliving their circumstances, their trauma, because you can change in your mind how it happened. Like if you think about like people who gave birth, right? So you think about, I gave birth, and in the moment you're like, this fucking hurts. Right? I'm never doing this
why
again.
I'm not doing that.
but at the same time, when you remember it back, you're like, it was beautiful. It was so
Isn't
meaningful.
That like the
it was
2 year
so powerful.
thing where every 2 years everyone's like, well, I don't really.
It
I don't
wasn't
really
that bad.
remember. Yeah, let's have another one. Yeah.
So, but it's the same thing. The way you remember it is how your mind protects you, right?
Yes,
so your mind protects you. It wasn't as bad as what it was when you were going through it.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing that I'm wondering, with interview after interview after interview, does it change? Like, do people remember it as it wasn't that bad because your mind protects you? Your brain is protecting you from those memories. And so, I imagine the first interview is very traumatic. And then the second interview is, they've covered some of that up. They've healed. They've gotten through it. It wasn't as bad. And then the more interviews that go, I imagine that might be something where it becomes harder to prosecute the longer it goes.
Yes. So that is why a lot of,
and that was a huge diversion. From
that's why. No, the DV stuff is so. It's we have so many though that have a late outcry.
Oh yeah,
because they do that same thing where especially if they're younger, that they want to protect that the mind wants to protect itself from the harm and the damage that occurred. So they will have a very late outcry. So it might be years later that they will And then when the family members or whomever they're close to looks back, they say, oh, I see you now. They can pinpoint when their behavior started to change because of this incident or incidents, They didn't know why. They didn't know what was going on. But when they say, when they finally, whoever comes forward says, hey, this happened to me, they can actually usually pinpoint and say, oh, that makes so much sense. All of these things kind of came together.
Wow.
Whoever the perpetrator was, whoever was that inflicted this, maybe they have their own experience. Like, oh, well, they were doing this or they were doing, and then it just all makes sense. But they do have a late outcry. But then when you do start to interview them, they sometimes either they start to remember little things at a time and more as you go along.
Right.
Or you'll interview them. You won't come back into the interview for like another 2 years because the case has, stalled out. Yeah. And then they'll say, oh, that didn't happen or this happened and it will change. So those cases are so hard. It's typically because it is a delayed outcry. It's a he said, she said case. And so it's just, but the mind is crazy.
It is.
It's very insane.
It's crazy. Well, just like when they're interviewing witnesses, they're very easily influenced, right? Like if I say, I saw a man in a green jacket run by, he had brown hair, he had blue eyes. And they're like, wait, are you sure it wasn't a blue jacket and green eyes? And you're like, oh, wait, was it? And then your mind doesn't know, right? And so you start questioning yourself and all of a sudden you doubt it. And that's how witness statements get so
And that is funny that you said that because a lot of, federal agencies, I know the GBI does it, where in order to get into the GBI, there is a test and you have to go through it and they flash it up there. It's a scenario and you have to jot down all these different, characteristics or, whatever that you you visualized.
Yep.
And then you have to turn that in and you'll like, well, was there a guy in a green jacket or a or was there a blue pen in the picture? And so they do that just to get into, agencies as well, because, they want to make sure that you're height and alert, I guess on all that kind of stuff going in. So.
As you know, I own a security company, right? So with our security training, we actually do that. We actually do a situational awareness test.
Okay.
And we'll flash up a cartoon photo or a photo of an accident scene, and we'll give them 30 seconds, look at the accident scene, and then we'll turn it off, and then we'll say, okay, how many people were involved? Was, female or male? What were the ages? What was the color of the car? And it's crazy because we usually do this in a group setting, and it's dangerous because the moment somebody says, I think there was 2 guys and a girl, and they're like, nope, it was 3 guys. Oh yeah, it was 3 guys. You're like, okay, it's like they influence each other and they convince each other what they saw.
Yeah.
And, the first person might have been dead accurate, but they'll question themselves, and so we do the same thing with our security guards because situational awareness is so important, right? And you don't know it until you need it, right?
Yes.
And so like we walk around half blind so often, and we really don't take in what's around us unless we're trained to do that.
And that's what I train Jiu Jitsu, and that's one thing I love is that it with especially the kids that are taking classes and stuff, they catch on to it so fast. Well, they catch on to everything fast. I see little kids going down ski slopes with like no poles. I'm like,
it's crazy.
I'm not fearless like that anymore. But we teach, we do women's self-defense classes on Saturdays, but we teach that really something martial arts, something that you have to make sure you're aware of your surroundings, what's going on next to you. Mm-hmm. But I always say 540 degrees. Like I always teach that in my classes, 540 degrees. And people are like, well, what's that? I'm like, because you might be looking ahead of you. Most people are looking down at their phones.
Right. Which is terrible.
It is horrible.
Absolutely terrible. Yeah.
Or they're looking, they understand to look behind them, when they're walking out in a dark, grocery store. They just went to the grocery store. It's kind of dark outside. They might look behind them. They might look beside them. Mm-hmm. But, what if you're like on a stairwell coming down?
Right.
Are they looking like below? Are they looking above them?
Right.
They, you don't know. It's all around. Mm-hmm. So, people are usually only focused on what's in front of them.
Right. Right.
Like I said, unless they're on their phones.
Right. Which is the worst thing you can do, by the way. So just for everyone listening, the worst thing you can do if you are out walking around by yourself is be on your phone, because you look like somebody who could be victimized pretty easily because you have no situational awareness at that point. Yeah. And I
love it when they have their ear pods on too. That's even better.
Yeah.
It's even better.
Okay. You know what's awesome though? You called them ear pods, and forever my son made fun of me for saying that, the AirPods.
Is that it?
He's like, Mom, stop that. It's not called an ear pod. It's called an AirPod.
Is that a Gen Z thing?
Yeah. So I call him whatever I want to call him, and my son makes fun of me constantly.
You think that comes out of the little things that are...
the little things stuck in your ear. Okay, so tell me, who influences you?
When I think of, especially like during this time of year, and just the holidays and special events and stuff like that, obviously, I spent a lot of time away from my family,
right?
And I'm not going to say it's like sacrifice, necessarily, but it's something that I wanted to do, and I wanted to do it for my community, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But I did miss stuff.
Yeah.
And so, and I knew that going into it. Like I'm not, but at the same time, I think of the girls and the guys that are overseas and they're on long stints out there, or there's single mothers, single dads that are they're working maybe 2 jobs, 3 jobs just to make ends meet to support their kids, but at the same time that's also taking away from them. So for me, it's somebody that it's all the people that are sacrificing in order to give up to maybe potentially the community or whatever they need to do in order to get by, to give back to, their kids, their community, whatever it is that they, see fit. It's just, but that to me, when you go to the airport, when you're flying out or coming into, and it says, thank you for all the servicemen. And you see that, the kids, I mean, they're kids.
I know.
And they're, greens coming, from wherever they're coming from. And hopefully they're going to go see their families. And maybe they're being shipped off, though, to another place. And, all the nurses that are working and teachers, and, whatever it is. But those that are giving up something and sacrificing, in order to do what they need to do to survive and get by. That's the people that influence me.
Yeah, I totally respect that. So, absolutely. Yeah, I think about them a lot as well. So we don't do enough for our service people, whether it's law enforcement, nurses, military.
I guess the firefighters too. I guess.
But no, we don't do enough for them. They put so much on hold to protect our communities, and we need to be more grateful to them. So tell me a little bit more about like insider threat assessment, right? So tell me, when you're in your job, right? You're 9 to 5, like I'm doing insider threat assessment.
Sounds weird.
I know, right?
That sounds weird.
You transition from law enforcement to private sector. How weird was that?
Oh, it's still new, so it's still kind of weird. But my main thing was, obviously I can still teach and instruct in the academies. Like my big thing now is to give back to the ones that are coming up through the ranks, and that's my goal, and thankfully I still get to do that and instruct them, because the knowledge needs to be passed on, right? And we need all of it, especially in today's society. So, sure. But it's been a little bit of a transition. I work, though, it hasn't been as hard of a transition. So I started obviously with Group 9 Risk Consulting. Yep. And so I'm still doing consulting with them. Right. So they gave me a great opportunity in order to kind of get into the front door, see what security was all about in the corporate field. And really, when I went to GSX, it was kind of, the question was posed to me, see what's out there. Yeah. And see if this is something like you could leave law enforcement and see yourself doing this in the future. Okay. And because it might not be your thing, it might not be your shtick, Right. And so, and it was very eye-opening how security and law enforcement really, there's a bridge to be gapped there. Yeah, it really is. There's just so the security field, they have so many cool, neat, advances that police forces may not have, because they don't have, the money typically. Sure. I mean, let's just, call it for what it is. But they can coincide. Yeah. And so I love that. I'm going to a conference next Friday, and it's kind of that same, the LEO and the security field, bridging the gap and all the different topics. And I'm very curious as to what's going to transpire from that and what I can learn from and bring back to, even my own company. But so I got into it through the consulting, and then this lovely gentleman decided to reach out to me on LinkedIn. LinkedIn has been amazing as far as networking. Oh 100%. My goodness. Never would I have ever thought. Right. And kind of, said, hey, we have this opportunity. Yeah. Do you think that this would be something like up your alley? It was still investigations. It wasn't anything financial. So I was like, okay, let's check this out. Yeah. So the guys in the group, it's a very small family. And I had been missing that for so long. Yeah. I had been missing that, AKA brotherhood, for so long. And they also are all retired military operations guys. Yep. So it's not like it was that far from what I had kind of come from. I could still talk the lingo, still be myself. Sure. And the guys have been nothing but supportive, amazing, and it's very close knit. So I really got lucky, and I have the best of both worlds now. Yeah. And I'm learning so much from, Group 9, from, my corporation now, and the guys within. I can still instruct and
Yeah.
get to do podcasts.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yes.
So,
well, and I love that you are out there kind of putting your talents in multiple places, because I think that that's where you really kind of grow holistically,
Yes.
right? Because if you're just, like I run this security company, but, doing this podcast has really filled a whole other passion of mine, which is kind of elevating women and, promoting women who are doing awesome things, right? So, but I think the more you do along those lines of like, kind of speaking to each one of your passions, it makes you feel more whole.
Yes.
Right.
I definitely was in a place where I was missing something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this, divine intervention, and it just, and all the pieces fell in the right place, and all the people that I've been meeting, it's really solidified everything that I've been doing up until now. And I really feel like now I'm coming into my own more than I've ever.
Right.
And it's funny because, when you're in your 20s, you're like, oh, I got to get it done. I got to accomplish this. I got to do that.
Yeah.
And I don't know if my right frontal lobe wasn't completely developed or what, but now it's starting to close. Right. And I'm like, okay, I can do this. This is fulfilling to me.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's definitely a different. It's my new coming of whatever it may be. So
So where are insider threats coming from? Like what are you typically investigating? Is it cyber? Is it fraud? Is it theft?
You're an insider threat.
Uh-huh. Oh, am I? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Legit.
So you can be an insider threat.
Right.
Yeah. If you were an employee, then I would look at you.
You look pretty sketchy.
Yeah. Okay. You're like, what is she up to today? No. So like, what is an insider threat? I mean, it's the insider employees of the company, right? So those are the ones that they're going to take down a company either inadvertently or advertently, like wittingly or unwittingly,
right?
So but people don't always know that. You know, they don't know what they're doing on their computer half the time.
Trust me, I know.
So it's like technology. It's beautiful and also destructive.
Well, and I've got to make sure that when we give laptops out, they're locked down. You're not like getting on all of our billing systems in the middle of Starbucks, right? Like, let's stay away from payroll right now. Do that at home when you're on a secure network. But so simple things like that could potentially pose a huge threat, right?
And that's the thing is Wi-Fi. Like people don't understand all the intricacies within like their computer. Just it's hooked up. Maybe you're traveling with it, going to a different in your VPN. I mean, it's just so many different things, and so it's usually not one incident. It's usually multiple things, and it could be even somebody that gosh, there's so many. But I like, for instance, you're traveling and you get on the wrong network. That network ends up like getting hacked, and then they get into the systems and stuff like that. So that's like an inadvertent. They should have known. Right. It was,
we had a situation where, it was so bad. So we had a guy who had given a girlfriend a phone that he did not log out of all the way. And then they broke up.
Oh, no.
She got mad, went into all of his work systems, which were my systems, by the way, and hacked in and created all kinds of chaos for us.
Oh, I don't know.
So she got prosecuted, but just know that it was again one of those things where he didn't even think about it, right. Like it wasn't even a concern when everything was good. It's when things turn bad or people get desperate that things can turn pretty ugly pretty quickly.
And that's one thing. It's like, we have different behaviors and triggers that we look for. Mm-hmm. And, people, if they're stuck in a bad financial situation and also their job is on the line, you start to, now obviously remote working has definitely put a little kink in that because we're not face to face now being able to see your demeanor, your mannerisms, what's normal, what's not normal.
Right.
But that's why insider threat stuff is usually proactive and try not to be as reactive.
Right.
But you have to have certain things in place in order to actually do that.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's up to the companies. Companies, I think, are getting more on board with understanding that they need to be proactive in today's society more so than ever.
Sure.
And not be reactive.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, because once you're chasing something, it becomes a huge distraction.
Oh, it does. Yeah.
So,
and it can definitely cost a company a lot of time, money, energy, resources. It's kind of insane of how bad it can get.
Absolutely. So on behalf of women who are out there in the world doing, going about their daily lives, what can they do? I know you're huge into, defense and protection and, teaching self-defense. What are 3 things you would advise women to do while they're out and about in their world?
Just like on a daily?
Yeah.
Be cognizant of their surroundings.
Yeah.
Most importantly.
Mm-hmm.
I think that having like for instance, I can carry a gun. Yeah. But if you don't know how to access it, then you're at a loss of
right.
You're still exposed.
Right.
So I think that you need to take classes.
Mm-hmm.
We have at our Jiu Jitsu gym, we have a women's self-defense class every Saturday.
Yep.
And it's free.
Yeah.
So there are things out there that every female can do. It's just having the drive to do it, But I definitely think that you should have awareness, have an escape plan.
Yeah, always.
Yeah. And then always have, some kind of something on your keychain or your keychain in your hand. But carry yourself with confidence.
That's a big factor, isn't it?
Yes.
Because I think that's one reason that, typically, and one thing that I always advise people of is make eye contact. Mm-hmm. When you're out walking around, make eye contact with the stranger that's walking, towards you. Because if they know that you've seen them, they're less likely to victimize you because you can describe them. Yes. Right? But if you're, head down in your phone, looking away, afraid to make eye contact, all day long, you're screaming victim. Right?
Oh, 100%.
And so I make eye contact. I'll say hi to them. I'll let them know I'm not afraid. It can be, whatever time at night, doesn't matter. But confidence, right? It's about confidence. It's about if you pick on me, I'm going to fight back. It's giving that perception of I'm not going to be a victim tonight. Yeah. So.
Well, it's like if, you see something that looks, mousy, so to speak.
Yeah.
Kind of slunched over, kind of shifty eyes, not really wanting to make eye contact. And then you see the person, the female that's, striding along.
Yeah.
And she's, chest is up, head is high. She's making eye contact. Which one are you going to say? Who can I potentially make a victim?
Right, exactly.
So
yeah, I know. I tell that to people all the time, especially young girls who, are on their phone all the time. I'm like, please don't be on your phone when you're walking in your, in the parking lot to your car. Please don't do that at night. Yeah. Please don't, be distracted or afraid to look at people. Look them dead in the eye and say hi to them.
It's
going to throw them off.
Yes. And I say also, even in your own apartment complex, the parking decks.
Oh, yeah.
Are a big target area.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we're like, oh, I feel safe because it's your apartment deck. Right. But anybody typically can get in there. Right. And always have your keys out first. Look around. People are hiding behind cars. You don't know.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, and a lot of them, unfortunately, don't have cameras either. So you have to always take that into a factor and say, okay. Well,
and even if you see a camera, it doesn't guarantee that sucker's working.
No. That is, especially in certain areas.
Yeah. So that's the other problem is that there's a lot of great technology out there, but you actually have to maintain it.
Yes. That might cost too much money. But I think the lawsuit that might ensue might be a little bit more,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So one of the questions that I always ask is, as women, we give our power away all the time, right? So speaking of, being powerful when you're walking and confident when you're walking. So tell me about a time that you gave your power away, whether it was giving credit to somebody else or letting somebody kind of dictate what what was going to happen, or, just tell me about a time. And you're a pretty strong woman, and, kind of, people say that, oh, you're a strong woman. I bet you've never done that. Look, we do it all the time, I think, in our lives. It's something we do. We
do. And so I'll start off by saying that when I was growing up, I wanted to have my dad's attention, and I think a lot of little girls do.
Sure.
But I wanted, my dad's attention. So I did all of, like, the boy stuff. I don't have any siblings. So, I was like, okay, we're going to, play ball. We're going to, wash the truck. We used to work on kit cars together.
Oh, cool.
I like tinkering around. Like, I like figuring things out. So it's not that I didn't like these things, because I did. But at the same time, I think that longing to have that relationship and the yearning for attention from a male figure, it played a factor into the, like, going into law enforcement and saying that I wanted to emulate specific guys that, I did respect them, and they were great leaders and stuff like that. But at the same time, I wanted to be them. Mm-hmm. And I did everything to, like, make it where, you notice me. I went out for everything. I wanted to be the best. I wanted to, I want to be the first, whatever it may be. But I wanted to be them instead of being me.
Right.
And I don't know if that happens a lot with females in law enforcement. I think that it can go either way, or I should say a different way. But for me, I wanted to prove something to them, because I could be up on their level. I could be them at one point in time in my career. Yeah. And that's not what I should have done.
Right.
Not saying that I didn't have some good times, and I went through and I was able to get stuff that I wanted to get done, and I had goals and aspirations. Not saying that they were theirs, because they still were mine, but I needed to make it my own.
Yeah.
So I think as far as that goes, that's kind of how I gave my power away. And I think that it's taken me longer than I would have liked to say, okay, I'm making this mine. Yeah. I'm coming into my own, and I have something worthwhile to give.
Right. Yeah.
And people are listening to me, not to what I've heard from 20 guys.
Right.
Yes. But to me and what I have to say and my own thoughts and feelings on stuff. Right. And so it's taken me a little bit longer.
Yeah.
But and it's made me who I am, but at the same time, it shaped me. But I definitely gave away my power to some extent.
Yeah. Well, and I get that, because I think when we're younger, we just want to be accepted. And we don't really know what that looks like. We're trying to figure out who we are, right? And so we're like, well, I don't know who I am, but I like them, so I'll be like them.
Yeah,
I always warn girls of things like that. When I see a girl who, she's dating this guy and he's really into cars, so she's really into cars, and then she dates another guy and he's really into sports, so she's really into sports. Yeah. And now, like
a chameleon.
Yeah. And I'm like, be you, have your own interests, have your own passions, and I think let somebody like you for that.
Yeah. And I think that's, unfortunately, when I was, and even now, it's law enforcement, females make up only 12%.
Oh, wow.
So when I was coming up, and it was probably even less.
Wow. Yeah.
So there was no really strong females to look up to and be like, and have a mentor.
Yeah.
So I think that's also a part of the problem, you know? And so and for me now, instructing, and I'm trying to be that mentor. And I was just instructing and helping out with the defense tactics class about a month or so ago, and there was the largest number of females in that class that I had seen to date. It was 11 females.
Wow.
Typically there's like 3.
Wow, that's awesome.
At best. So I was like, yes, this is awesome.
Right.
So there was 3 guys And so it was a gauntlet.
Yeah.
And we put them through this where physically they had to go through it.
Yeah.
And then at the very end, they actually have to do like defense tactic moves on us. So we wear them out.
Right.
And then they have to try to get fight us off. And so then they can keep going.
Right.
So, and I love it, obviously. It's great. But I want to make sure though that they understand a female can be just as bad as a male out there when you're fighting. Like women can be dirty.
Yes.
So I went with all the women because I wanted to make a point that if you can't get me off of you and fight me, a man is going to be much harder.
Yeah.
And I want to see where you're at.
Yeah, for sure.
So it was very eye-opening for them.
That's awesome.
And it was so rewarding for me because they all came up to me. Even though it wasn't pretty. Yeah. And I know they got frustrated. Some of them got very frustrated. Yeah. But it was, I would rather you do break down now here than out there. This hopefully will save your life. Right. But I love that every one of them came up to me and was like, what do you do? How do I go about my training? Like, what do I need to focus on? All these questions. And that's awesome. It was, the light bulb went on. Yeah. And to me, that's the best part.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you are out there teaching women how to defend themselves and, firearms. And we were talking before the podcast, everybody who's ever trained me how to use my firearm was a man. And it's different, like the grip and, how it's everything.
Your mechanics are going to be different.
And so it's hard. And so they're trying to instruct me like, why can't you do it this way? And I'm like, it doesn't freaking work.
You're like, trust me. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't work. I cannot do it like
right. You. Like, and so, being a firearms instructor, like, that mechanically the way we carry a firearm and the way we hold and the way we shoot is going to be slightly different. And not that we, can't be as accurate or can't be as good at it, but like a concealed carry for me. Like I have a permit to be, to carry concealed, but finding a gun that you can't see when I'm wearing it is pretty darn hard.
Yeah. And one that also doesn't like dig into like your stomach. Or
right. It's like, it's not as easy as it is for a guy. And so there are all these factors to take into consideration when you're trying to select a gun, and having a female help you figure that out is very important. Yes. So, because I go into a gun shop and, all these guys are like, oh, this one's great to carry. And I hold it and I'm like, this weighs like a freaking child weighs this much. Like, I can't carry this. And so, so it's very different. But so what advice would you give to your 18-year-old self?
I think I would say to my 18-year-old self, probably from 18 to like 25. No,
yesterday.
Yeah, that was yesterday. How'd you know? Thank you. I would tell myself though to slow down. Yeah. I would tell myself to slow down, that I have so much time. Right. Even though you don't think you do. And I always say, life is short. Right. You never know what's going to happen. Like that's my motto. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, especially in today's society. Yeah. But you have time, and don't rush into everything. You don't have to do everything right this second.
You don't? Wait.
I know. I'm so confused. I know. As you're coming in with like 5 bags and like multitasking, I'm
so confused what happened here. I feel like this is life coaching right now.
Okay. We're going to talk about that. That's phase 2. Right. But yeah, I have a very hard time. And even now, I'll rush around and do all the things that I need to get done. And and some of the things, like, I don't have to clean the refrigerator right now. Like I could take time to actually go and spend time with my friends or, my family or whatever. Like the fridge is fine. It'll wait. Right. But I think that really just, it's okay to let go. It's okay to let go. It's okay to just be.
Yeah, I know. That's really tough. But yes, I get it. I used to. I think part of the reason why I'm divorced is because for the longest time, every time we would go on a trip somewhere, the night before I'd be shampooing the carpets. My husband was like, what the hell are you doing?
It's okay.
I'm like, listen, it's going to dry while we're gone, and it's just a good idea. you're shampooing the carpets at 2:00 in the morning. We have a 6 a.m. flight.
It totally makes sense.
And I'm like,
that makes sense.
But I don't understand. What's the problem?
That makes sense. You know, it's that's common sense.
Yeah,
See,
so
I would totally be on board with that.
100%, right? So, again, this is why I don't have a marriage.
It's fine. It's fine.
I do
It's fine.
things my way.
His loss is fine.
It's all good. It's all good. So, what do you wish more people knew?
I wish more people would probably stop and think about who they're interacting with, because you don't know who you're actually interacting with. You could think that they could be a bum on the street, and guess what? They're a millionaire.
Yeah,
because the ones that are true millionaires,
you can never tell.
You don't know who they are, but you also don't know who's going through stuff.
Right.
And I think for me, people don't take enough time to stop and be like, well, why are they acting like that?
Yeah.
Like, is it really like an interaction between me and you, or is it because there's something more to what's going on behind the scenes?
Yeah.
But you I used to, in my patrol car, I used to drive around and think of scenarios. Maybe it was a mind control thing. I don't know. Maybe I was trying to envision myself in some of these nice houses, you know, and what my life would be like. But it didn't. It sort of worked out.
Did it work?
I'm in a house.
See?
It's not like a $1 million house. I do have a roof over my head, so that's good. But I would try to envision what family lived there.
Yeah.
What goes on behind the scenes? What do they do for a living? You know, do they have kids? What do they do? Like, what is their family like? You know, just all these different things that would come to my head that I'm like, because you would think that some of these houses you look at, right?
Yep.
That everything is picture perfect with them.
Yeah. Well, especially if you look at the Facebook version of them, right?
I call it facade book, first off. Second off, I got off of it a long time ago because I just...
Yeah.
It does it matter? It shouldn't matter, you know, but I call it facade book for that reason.
There you go.
But yeah, I would, I would just envision stuff and say, you know, even though what it looks like on the outside may not be what's actually going on the inside.
Right.
So I think that everybody should take the time, and because you never know who you're going to meet.
Absolutely.
You never know what they're going to be able to, you know, you're going to be able to learn from them.
Yeah.
You never know who you're going to help. And maybe it's in the end, and it could be years later that they end up helping you.
Yeah, for sure.
It's just, you just don't know.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the beauty of going through this process called life.
Yeah, it's true. It's so true.
Yeah.
Because I'm the same way. Like, you never know. First impressions, you just never know who you're talking to, right? And so some people that I thought were, you know, awful people until I got to know them, I'm like, man, she's really freaking cool, you know, or like, he's been really helpful.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's really tough. I agree. Don't judge a book by the cover. It's good. Well, this has been super fun. I've really enjoyed this. I'm so excited that we had a chance to do this finally. I know we've talked about it for a while, but thank you so much for being on the show.
This has been great.
Yeah, it's been fun. So thank you guys so much for joining us for another episode of Pretty Powerful Podcast. You can check out Amanda Bear on our website, and we will hopefully be talking to you again soon. But
I look forward to
we'll be
it.
setting up some self-defense courses for sure. So,
Awesome.
But thank you guys so much for joining us. I hope everyone has an amazing day.
Thank you for joining our guests on the Pretty Powerful Podcast. And we hope you've gained new insight and learned from exceptional women. Remember to subscribe or check out this and all episodes on prettypowerfulpodcast.com. Visit us next time, and until then, step into your own power.